Welcome. It's Adele from lifecoachadele.com, and it's our Friday session just before noon. I'm going to sit aside for just a couple minutes, let you get online. I'm going to give you something to think about. I've got a dolly. I've got a little dog. I've got a car. And I thought I had something else. It's going to be a surprise. Anyway, we're going to be talking about sacred messengers today. And so these are going to be my props, and I've got a flip chart at the back, which I'm going to see. Maybe I can move it a little bit closer. That doesn't help. But anyway, I'll keep it on the top part of the chart so you can see. So I'll just step away for just a second, and then we'll be back. So think about what these three things have in common, how they're going to help you with your health. Okay. Be back in a second. Okay, welcome. So what we're going to talk about today is sacred messengers. So what exactly is a sacred messenger? Well, a sacred messenger can be a mental, emotional symptom, a physical symptom. It can be anything that brings our attention that something's going wrong inside our body. So as a natural health practitioner, I call them sacred messengers, and they're pretty cool. But what we often do is we ignore them. So we've lost the ability to see these signs and symptoms as a language that our body is expressing to us. It can be that nagging feeling that we've left unattended. I'm just going to move my thing where I can read it a little bit better. So it affects all aspects of ourselves, and that's why I brought these little things here. So if this was your baby, and your baby was exhibiting symptoms that were not as usual as the ones that you normally decided that was their little personality, their temperament, their emotional state, their physical well-being, you would notice. Usually we notice more when we don't have the ability to necessarily communicate verbally. So your child is giving you signs and symptoms that they're not feeling well, and that could be a temperature. It can be something inside their tummy where they're off their food. So maybe you realize that their taste buds are doing something funny, or maybe they have a little bit of an irritable stomach, that maybe they have the flu, or maybe their temperature is different, or maybe they're not sleeping as well. So you recognize the signs and symptoms of this little person. When it's your car, you recognize that your car backfires, or that the treads are getting a little bit low, or that you're getting a little bit of smoke out of the tailpipe, or some of the gauges are coming on. So this thing, you start to pay attention to the signs and symptoms that something is going wrong with your car. And finally, a puppy. So you have a little puppy, and even though they can communicate with you, because you know when they want water, they go and bang their dish, or they want food and they scratch at their bowl, or they want a hug, they come up and see you. But when they're not feeling well, we check to see if their nose is dry, and we see that they're off their food, or they're just not as social as they used to be. So we recognize these little signs and symptoms in our pets, and that brings our attention to something that's going wrong in the body. But what happens when it's us? When we grow up to be big people, and we have signs and symptoms in our modern world that we're ignoring. And quite often, they come in the form of certain things. Irritability. If you feel irritable, if you are sleepless. And what would be another one? Oh, this is a really common one. Hi, Bill. Thanks for joining me. So, a really common one in today's world is anxiety. So these are things that we might experience throughout our day. Earlier we talked about recognizing it in our children, in our pets, or in our automobiles. We listen for the signs and symptoms that something's going wrong. But are you aware that every time you experience irritability or anxiety, or the results of such being sleeplessness, you actually suppress your immune system for 6 to 8 hours at a time? And each and every time this enters your consciousness, your immune system is suppressed, meaning it's not operating as well. So if you consider you're unprotected, so you get a cold, you get the flu. Your immune system is not functioning as high because you've become irritable, because you are experiencing anxiety. Any negative thought has the ability to flush, well, it absolutely does, it flushes negative physiology within our systems. And negative physiology shuts down our immunity. So what do we often do when we feel bad? Well, when the going gets tough, the tough go shopping. And we buy ourselves something. We buy ourselves a nice little treat that makes us feel better for a temporary period of time. And why does it do that? Well, because it has the ability to give us a dopamine flush. The problem with it is purchasing stuff only gives us like a shortened, incomplete set of all this positive physiology. Same as eating a Twinkie. You know how that makes you feel good. Have a cupcake. I think I'll have a muffin today. And all of those things make us feel good because we do get that dopamine flush from the sugar, from the things that remind us of these treats that we used to get from our parents. But what ends up happening is we stop listening to the sacred messengers, and that becomes more serious. So when we really want to get back to this natural language of our body, we have to go deeper into the symptom. So say we feel a bit irritable, say we're feeling a bit anxious today, we've got a bit of stress in our lives. What we want to do is we want to define it a little bit further so that we know about it. And what that does is it actually makes us feel better, because when we're we're in the limbic brain, so I'm feeling anxious. Oh, I feel uncomfortable. It makes me feel anxious. And what happens is our emotional brain takes over and we're flushing negative physiology. And this brain is just running a pattern of behavior. It doesn't have a cognitive function. So what we need to do is we need to get back in our car and we need to switch gears back into our neocortex. So we need to ask ourselves a question. What does this anxiety mean to me? By asking our mind a question, we've switched gears. See, it's like driving a standard car. We've gone from our limbic brain in first into our overdrive brain, the neocortex. And that is where we answer the question for what this anxiety represents to us. And that's where we start to look for more clues. Like, what made it feel better last time? When I felt this anxiety, I went for a walk and that made me feel good. Maybe I called a friend and saw what they were up to, made plans for getting together. Or you hugged your partner, or you turned on some of your favorite music. And that made you feel better. So it's a good thing to know what natural happiness builders we have that can switch that physiology. And we find that in our neocortex. So we get out of the emotional brain and we get back into the big thinker. And we ask ourselves a couple of questions. What does this mean to me? We can define it further. Does it happen at a certain time of the day? I'll tell you a little story if you don't mind. I used to have several businesses in Whistler. And, I live on the Sunshine Coast and I have to take a ferry to get up the mountain. So by the time my car hit that off-ramp on the ferry, I could start to feel my heartbeat just a little faster. And I noticed my respiration was up and I could feel some anxiety in my stomach. The closer that I wound up that road to Whistler, I was actually getting fairly stressed. It was a difficult time in Whistler's history leading up to the 2010 Olympics, and there was lots of construction, not a lot of people in there buying services at my spa. So I was feeling the financial stress of all that. And one day I got so stressed that I was hyperventilating in my car. So I pulled over to the side of the road and I sat there and I just thought, I'll just tip my seat back a little bit and get myself under control. I didn't have a brown paper bag. And pretty soon, knock, knock, knock on my side window, and I was like, whoa, who's here? And it was this really nice flag girl. And she's like, are you okay? And I said, well, actually, I'm having a little bit of anxiety. And she said, oh, well, I just got my first aid ticket. I can help you. And I was like, okay, I'll just lay back down here while you go and do what you're going to do. So I was laying there, relaxing, and all of a sudden I hear this woo, 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 and woo, 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 woo. I heard ambulances, and I heard fire trucks, and I peeked up over the dashboard of my car, and I saw like 6 vehicles, police cruisers, a couple of ambulances, a fire truck, and lots of people in uniform. And if you thought I was stressed before that, I was in high stress mode then. And I was like, what has she done? Here I am, just minding my own business, having a little bit of a panic attack. And all of a sudden I've got a lot of help at hand. So anyway, I tell you that story because it's before I had the tools, the neuroscience tools where I could have talked myself into a different state of mind. Understanding that I was stressed, and I actually did make major changes in my life to remove myself from that situation that I knew was not healthy. I knew enough about that because, as we know, staying in a chronic stress situation is a disaster in waiting. We know that we have a psychological constitution of how we're feeling in our body. We know now that it's flushing the physiology within, and we know now that stress, when not dealt with in the proper way, is the leading indicator for one of the major killers. It kills more men and women in Canada and the US and in the world than any other disease, and it's called heart disease. So heart disease, if you're not aware, is the biggest killer. It killed, of all the people that died prematurely in the last several years as they've been doing these studies, 27% of the people that died of heart disease died prematurely, meaning they died in their early years. Should never have happened. And the scary thing about it is that 54% of the people that died without ever knowing they had a problem. And the other great big one is 67% of the people that died of heart disease never mentioned a single thing to their doctor. And I have to ask you, why is that? We're feeling it. So what's happening? We've lost, I believe it's because we've lost the ability to read the language that our body is sending us. We're getting signals in our mind, we're getting signals in our behavior, we're getting signals in our emotional state. And yet what do? We go out and buy a Twinkie. We go out and we buy something pretty. And we all do it. When there's all kinds of things that we can do that will actually reduce our stress and bring us back into balance. But first what we have to do is to recognize that these messengers are important, because often we numb the symptoms. And how do we do that? Like I said, we buy something pretty. We drink a glass of wine when we get home from work because we're stressed out and we know it's going to be a quick fix. We go out and we smoke, which we know, again, is really not good for us. Some people take drugs, they take marijuana, they use substances to calm these feelings of dis-ease within the body. Possibly it's attached to an event in their lives, because that's how the limbic brain works. When the brain feels a certain emotion, it goes all the way down, what I call into the pit, and finds that little event when you were 4 that made you feel that way. So if you had anxiety because you had people coming for your birthday party and your best friend didn't show up, or they, didn't eat your birthday cake the right way, then that caused stress or caused some sort of emotion. So that little emotion is going to keep threading back into your life. And every time an emotion that's similar shows up, for whatever reason, those are the pipeline. That is the pipeline that's going to be attached. So these feelings run really deep. And when we allow our limbic brain to control us, we do those tailspins. We react really fast. Maybe we tell somebody off. Or we have a little temper tantrum, or we throw something, or whatever it might be for our go-to. This is what happens. So we need to start to learn how to listen to the messengers, ask ourselves immediately to stay in our neocortex so we know what we're feeling, find out more about it. So if we do want to seek help, go to our health professional, go to a naturopath, a homeopath, then we know what we're talking about, because they're going to ask you for what we call a 3-legged stool. We're going to have 3 things. So just like navigating, if you've ever sailed, or maybe you're going on a road trip, you want to have 3 points of navigation so that you can triangulate yourself anywhere in the world. Well, we do that with our bodies too. We triangulate what's happening within our system by having a 3-legged stool. So we want to know what the symptom is, if it's located in more than one part of the body, and what time that it happens, or what makes it better or worse. So we want to know what we call the modalities of those symptoms, so that we can clearly define them and start to make inroads into making us better, so that we can prevent things like this happening. When someone is out of control, we recognize it, and sometimes it's hard for us to bring that to someone else's attention. But we can start to feel the way through in order to make changes for both ourselves, our families, and our loved ones. So one of the things that we find is a maintaining cause. So we want to know if there's something that's actually drawing stress into our lives. And is that something that's going to be able to be changed, or is it something that we have to figure out how to manage? Because the science is in on stress. If we don't deal with it, then it goes deeper and it creates physiology. But there are people that thrive on stress. They love the adrenaline. They say stress makes me faster, stronger, bigger, wiser. I love it when I get stressed. Those people actually do fine. But that's not the majority of us. The majority of us are the people that are going to be in this category. And we know that there's 3 stages to stress. The first stage, life in the stage of a phase 1 stress person, is they're coping. I'd say that they're in their, going on their first plane ride, put it that way. So it's exciting. There's new opportunities ahead. They're coping well. They're playing hard, working hard. What when we were young, right? We could do that. Get up the next morning and do it all again. And so that's phase 1. We have a bit of stress in our lives, but we're coping and we're able to put everything in perspective, and it's not interfering with sleepless nights and having anxiety and all that kind of stuff. We're just coping fine. And then stage 2 is when we're cruising. Say you're up in a plane and you've hit 33,000 feet and you're cruising, and you've done the plane ride a few times now, and there's a bit of turbulence and your plane starts to bump, and sometimes it bumps really hard and all those pictures come out of the back of the seat and land on the floor, and those are the scary times. So that's when we're in phase 2, where we've done it too many times. We're used to living in the stress. We're used to the pace of pushing ourselves a little bit harder. We're bringing work home. We're, letting a few things slide. Maybe we're not taking in the family events, or maybe we missed some dinner with friends, or we're just too tired. We just want to lay on the couch and, tune out by tuning into the TV. So that's stage 2. And maybe you're drinking some wine, or, having a few too many beers. And even when you're sleepless, maybe you're taking the odd sleeping pill. So that's stage 2. And then you don't really know what's going to happen from here, because either you can self-correct and stay in stage 1 and stage 2, but the line from stage 2 to stage 3 is invisible. And why is it invisible? Because we're taking the Zoloft, we're taking the Prozac, we're taking the medications that put us to sleep at night so that we can sleep without anxiety in our systems. We're overtired, we're overtaxed, and we're overstressed. And I got to tell you, it's a dangerous slope, because people don't realize when they go from stage 2 to stage 3. It just happens. And that's why they don't tell their doctor that they're not feeling well. They don't even know, because they've numbed the symptoms. Or they've forgotten that the symptoms actually represent something. And there is a pattern to it, and there is a solution. So one of the first things is to know that the messengers that you're getting, whether mental, emotional, or physical, actually mean something. They mean something dearly to you. And I know that if you've had little children, or if you have a little grandchild, and you know when they're not feeling well, and you don't just let them not feel well. You cozy them up with a blanket, and you read them a book, and you take their temperature, and you tell somebody that the baby's not well. When the car's not well, you take it into a mechanic. You take it in and you get it tuned up, because maybe it's got some bad gas, or maybe it needs an oil change. It's time for a tune-up, and we know that. We even schedule it. But do we schedule a tune-up for ourselves? I don't think so. I'm always calling my clients saying, you haven't checked in for me for a little while. How's it going? And they're like, I've been meaning to call you for like 3 months. So glad you called. I'm like, I'm going to schedule it again. Our little puppies. These are our furry family. And we know when they're not well. But do we leave them in that state? No, we don't. We take care of them. We see the signs and symptoms of them not being well. And we make sure that we take care of it. So those are my things for today. Sacred messengers. Know what they are. Know how to read them. Try not to numb them. I can help. That's what I do. I can tell you right now that it doesn't have to be this way. you can have your best life and feel incredible. So my name is Adele, lifecoachadele.com. You can see all my services online. I do natural health. I do mind-body awareness. I do neurolinguistics programming that can remove an anxiety or even a physical symptom by changing how it's relating within your mind. It's incredible stuff, and I'd love to share it with you. So until we speak in person, thank you for tuning in. I really appreciate your time. And you stay well. If you want to ask me a question, I'll be online for a couple more minutes.